Lady Vela Sornkai stood before the mirror in her chamber and did not recognize herself. The wedding gown was beautiful. It was made of flowing white silk that caught the light like water. Tiny crystals were sewn into the fabric, and they sparkled with every small movement she made. Her silver-blue skin looked pale against all that white. Her purple eyes, the eyes that all Aetherans had, looked tired and empty. She was getting married today, not for love, not even for friendship. She was getting married to save her people from dying. The Aetherans had been at war for 30 years. 30 long years of fighting the Korthax Dominion, a brutal race of warriors who wanted to conquer every planet in the sector. The Aetherans were elegant people. They were tall and graceful, with skin that shimmered like moonlight and voices that sounded like music. But elegance did not win wars. Their fleets were broken. Their soldiers were exhausted. Their cities were burning. Then the humans came. They arrived from a distant part of the galaxy with their strange ships and their loud voices and their confusing emotions. The Terran Confederacy, they called themselves. They were small and soft and lived such short lives. But they had weapons that made the Korthax afraid. They had ships that could match the Dominion blow for blow. And they wanted friends. The price of friendship was simple. The humans wanted to join their people with the Aethyrans. They wanted a symbol of unity. They wanted a marriage. Vela was the third daughter of the High Council. She was not important enough to rule, but she was important enough to trade. Her father had called her to his throne room and explained the situation with cold, practical words. She would marry a human soldier. She would live with him and smile for the cameras, and show the galaxy that Aethyrans and humans were allies. She had been told. The door to her chamber opened, and her oldest sister Kaya walked in. Kaya was beautiful in the way that all Aetheran nobles were beautiful. Her silver hair fell past her shoulders, and her purple eyes were filled with pity. "It is time," Kaya said softly. Vela nodded. She did not trust her voice. They walked together through the long hallways of the palace. Servants stopped to bow. Guards stood at attention. Everyone looked at Vela with the same expression. "Poor thing," their eyes said, "sacrificed for politics." The wedding hall was filled with people. Aetheran nobles sat on one side, their faces carefully blank. Human officials sat on the other side, smiling and whispering to each other. At the front of the hall stood a priest and a human man. Vela studied her future husband as she walked toward him. His name was Caleb Grant. He was short by Aetheran standards, barely reaching her shoulder. His skin was a warm brown color, and his hair was black and cut very short. He had brown eyes that watched her approach with a calm, steady gaze. He was not ugly. He was simply ordinary. There was nothing special about him at all. Vela took her place beside him. The priest began speaking about duty and honor and the joining of two great peoples. Vela barely heard the words. She was thinking about her childhood, about the dreams she once had of marrying for love, about the poetry she wrote in secret, about passion and connection, and souls finding each other across the stars. Those dreams were dead now. "Do you, Lady Vela Sornkai, accept this man as your bonded partner?" the priest asked. "I do," she said. Her voice did not shake. "Do you, Caleb Grant, accept this woman as your bonded partner?" "I do," Caleb said. His voice was quiet and steady, and just like that, it was done. Humans, Vela learned, loved to celebrate. They laughed and drank and danced in ways that made the Aetheran nobles uncomfortable. Caleb stayed by her side through all of it. He did not try to make her talk. He did not try to touch her. He simply stood there, quiet and patient, letting her adjust. At one point, a human officer came over and slapped Caleb on the shoulder. "You lucky dog," the officer said with a grin. "She's gorgeous." Caleb smiled politely, but said nothing. Later, Vela noticed something strange. The other human soldiers treated Caleb differently than they treated each other. They did not slap his shoulder or make jokes at his expense. They nodded to him with respect that seemed almost like fear. When he walked past, conversation stopped. When he looked at someone, they looked away. "What did you do before this?" she asked him that night, after the celebration had ended, and they were alone in their new quarters. "What was your role in the military?" Caleb was unpacking a small bag of personal belongings. He paused at her question. "I was a ground operator," he said. "What does that mean?" "I went places and did things that needed doing." Vela frowned. It was not really an answer. "What kind of things?" Vela asked. Caleb turned to look at her. His brown eyes were unreadable. "Difficult things," he said. "Things I don't like to talk about." He smiled then, and the smile was warm and genuine. "Would you like some tea? I brought some from Earth. It's not as good as what you have here, but it's familiar to me." Vela wanted to push for more answers, but something in his expression made her stop. There was a wall there, a door that was closed. "Tea would be nice," she said instead. They sat together in the quiet of their quarters and drank tea from Earth. Caleb told her about the planet he came from. He described blue skies and green forests and oceans that stretched to the horizon. He talked about his mother, who had died when he was young, and his father, who had raised him alone. He asked her about Aethera, about her sisters, about the books she liked to read. It was strange. He seemed genuinely interested in her life. As the night grew late, Vela found herself thinking that perhaps this would not be so terrible. Caleb was kind. He was polite. He did not look at her like she was a prize to be won. But she also could not shake the memory of how those soldiers had looked at him. The respect in their eyes, the fear. What kind of man had she married? She would spend the next 6 months finding out. And when she finally learned the truth, it would change everything she believed about humans, about war, and about the quiet soldier who made her tea every morning and never once raised his voice. 6 months passed like water flowing downhill, slow at first, then faster and faster, until Vela could not remember what life had been like before Caleb. He was a strange husband. He woke before the sun every morning and trained alone in the courtyard below their window. Vela sometimes watched him from her balcony, still wrapped in blankets, as he moved through combat forms she did not recognize. His movements were beautiful in their precision. Every punch, every kick, every turn of his body was perfect. It looked like dancing, but she knew it was something far more dangerous. When he finished training, he would shower and make breakfast. He always made enough for both of them. He learned how to prepare Atherin dishes because he knew she missed the food from home. He was not a great cook, but he tried hard, and that meant something. During the days, they attended diplomatic functions together. They smiled for the cameras and shook hands with important people and pretended to be the perfect couple. At night, they returned to their quarters and talked about their days like two friends sharing a room. They did not share a bed. Caleb slept on a small couch in the corner, insisting that Vela take the large bed. She had offered to take turns, but he refused. It would not be proper, he said. She was a princess, and she deserved comfort. It was strange. Most men, human or Aetherian, would have demanded more from a marriage, but Caleb seemed content to simply exist beside her. He asked nothing and expected nothing. Vela found herself liking him more each day. She also found herself noticing more things about him. The way his eyes swept every room when they entered, checking for exits. The way he positioned himself between her and any stranger who got too close. The way his body tensed when someone moved too quickly nearby, like a spring being compressed. And the medals. She had found them by accident while cleaning one day. A small box hidden beneath their bed, filled with ribbons and metal circles with symbols she did not recognize. There were many of them, too many for an ordinary soldier. When she asked him about them, he simply smiled and changed the subject. The attack came without warning. They were traveling on a diplomatic convoy through neutral space, heading to a meeting with representatives from 3 other species. The convoy consisted of 4 ships, 2 Aetheran and 2 human, carrying politicians and their staff. Vela was in the observation lounge, watching the stars drift past, when the first explosion shook the ship. Alarms began screaming. Red lights flashed. The artificial gravity flickered once, twice, then stabilized. "What's happening?" she asked the guard beside her. The guard touched his communicator and listened. His face went pale. "Korthax," he said. "A full warband. They're boarding the ship." Vela felt her blood turn cold. The Korthax were monsters. They stood 8 feet tall with gray leathery skin and teeth like broken glass. They wore armor covered in spikes and carried weapons designed to cause maximum pain. They did not take prisoners. They took trophies. "We need to get you to safety," the guard said. They ran. Vela and 2 of her handmaidens followed the guard through smoke-filled corridors. Explosions echoed through the walls. Screams mixed with the sound of gunfire. The ship was dying around them. They turned a corner and stopped. 3 Korthax warriors stood in their path. They were massive, filling the corridor with their bulk. Their eyes, small and yellow, focused on Vela with hungry recognition. "Aetheran princess," one of them growled. Its voice sounded like rocks grinding together. "The warlords will pay well for you." The guard raised his weapon and fired. The plasma bolt hit the lead Korthax in the chest and did nothing. The warrior laughed and swung its massive arm, sending the guard flying into the wall. He did not get up. Vela's handmaiden screamed. The Korthax moved forward, reaching for her with clawed hands. Then Caleb was there. Vela did not see where he came from. One moment the corridor was filled with Korthax. The next moment, Caleb was standing between her and the monsters, holding nothing but a combat knife. "Run," he said. His voice was calm. Too calm. The Korthax laughed. "1 human against 3 of us? You will die slowly, little creature." Caleb did not respond. He simply moved. What happened next would stay in Vela's memory forever. It was not a fight. A fight implied 2 sides with equal chances. This was something else entirely. This was a predator among prey. Caleb flowed through the 3 Korthax like smoke through fingers. His knife found gaps in their armor that should not have existed. His hands twisted joints in ways that made bones snap like dry wood. One warrior swung at him with enough force to crush stone, and Caleb simply was not there. He had moved, faster than her eyes could track, and now he was behind the warrior, and now the warrior was falling with its spine severed. The second Korthax died with Caleb's knife in its eye. The third managed to fire its weapon once, before Caleb redirected the barrel toward the ceiling, and drove his palm into its throat. The creature choked once and collapsed. 3 Korthax warriors. 8 seconds, maybe less. Caleb stood among the bodies, his breathing steady, his expression unchanged. He looked at her with those quiet brown eyes, and she saw something she had never seen before. Not anger, not excitement, just complete, absolute focus. "Are you hurt?" he asked. She could not answer. Her voice had abandoned her. "Vela." He stepped toward her, and his voice softened. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head. He nodded once, then touched the communicator in his ear. "Grant to actual. Package is secure. Moving to extraction point. Send a team to Corridor 7 for cleanup." He took her hand. His grip was gentle, careful, as if she were made of glass. "Stay close to me," he said. "I'll get you out of here." They moved through the ship together. More Korthax appeared. More Korthax died. Caleb killed 11 more warriors before they reached the escape pods. He did it without hesitation, without wasted movement, without a single wasted breath. When they were finally safe, Floating in the escape pod waiting for rescue, Vela looked at the man she had married. Blood stained his clothes, his knuckles were torn, but his eyes were the same as always. Quiet, patient, kind. "Who are you?" she whispered. Caleb looked out the window at the stars. "I'm your husband," he said. "That's all that matters." But Vela knew now that it was not all. There was something else hiding behind those calm brown eyes, something dangerous, something that could kill an army. And she intended to find out exactly what it was. The rescue ship arrived 3 hours after the attack. Vela sat in the medical bay while doctors checked her for injuries. She had none, not a scratch. Caleb had made sure of that. He sat on a bed across from her, letting a human doctor clean the cuts on his hands. He had refused treatment twice before Vela insisted. Even then, he seemed uncomfortable with the attention. He kept glancing at her, checking that she was safe, even though they were surrounded by soldiers, and the nearest Korthax was probably 100 light-years away. The other survivors told stories about what had happened on the ship. They talked about the Korthax boarding parties, about the chaos and the terror, and they talked about the human soldier who had appeared from nowhere and killed everything in his path. "He was like a ghost," one Aetheran diplomat said, his voice shaking. "I saw him take down 5 of them without stopping. They couldn't even see him coming." "Who is he?" another asked. "I thought he was just the princess's husband, some low-ranking soldier they picked for the marriage." No one had answers. That night, after they arrived at a safe station and were given quarters to rest, Vela finally confronted Caleb. "Tell me the truth," she said, "all of it." Caleb sat on the edge of the couch where he always slept. He was still wearing his bloody clothes. He had not eaten or slept since the attack, but he did not look tired. He looked like a man preparing to carry a heavy weight. "What do you want to know?" he asked. "Everything. Who you are, what you are, why the Confederacy really sent you." He was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. "Have you ever heard of the Reaper program?" he asked. Vela shook her head. "Most people haven't. It's classified at the highest level. Only a handful of officials even know it exists." He paused. "The program started 40 years ago, when humanity first encountered hostile alien species. We realized very quickly that we were outmatched. Other species were stronger, faster, tougher than us. Our soldiers, no matter how brave, could not compete in direct combat." "So you built better weapons," Vela said. "No," Caleb shook his head. "We built better soldiers." He explained it slowly, carefully, like he was describing something painful. The Reaper program took volunteers from the military's best special forces units. These volunteers underwent 10 years of modification. Genetic enhancement to increase strength and speed. Neurological changes to improve reaction time and pattern recognition. Conditioning to remove fear and hesitation. When they emerged from the program, they were no longer ordinary humans. They were weapons wrapped in human skin. "There are only 17 of us," Caleb said. 17 who survived the process. "We are deployed alone, behind enemy lines. We don't fight wars. We end them." Vela stared at him. "You're saying you're some kind of super soldier?" "I'm saying I was designed to kill. That's what I do. That's all I was supposed to do." He looked down at his hands. "I've killed thousands of enemies over 15 years. Korthax, pirates, terrorists, warlords. I've collapsed governments and destroyed armies. I've done things that would give you nightmares." "Then why are you here?" Vela asked. "Why would they waste someone like you on a political marriage?" Caleb smiled sadly. "Because the Confederacy knew the Korthax would try to attack you. The marriage alliance with Aethera was too important to risk. They needed someone who could protect you no matter what happened. Someone who could fight off an entire warband if necessary." "So I was never really your wife," Vela said slowly. I was just a mission. No. Caleb's voice was firm. You were never just a mission. He stood up and walked to the window. Outside, stars drifted past in the endless darkness of space. They gave me a choice, he said. The Confederacy. They showed me the files of 3 different princesses who might be chosen for the marriage. I could have picked anyone. I could have refused entirely and gone back to combat operations. Why didn't you? He turned to look at her. Because I read your file. I read the letters you wrote to your sisters. I read the poetry you composed in private. I saw the paintings you made when you were young. He paused. You seemed like someone real, someone kind, someone who deserved more than a life of politics and duty. Vela did not know what to say. I've been a weapon my entire adult life, Caleb continued. I've never had a home. I've never had someone to care about. I thought maybe this was my chance to be something else. To protect someone instead of just killing enemies. To have a life that wasn't measured in body counts. And me? Vela asked quietly. What was I supposed to be? A reward for good service? No, Caleb shook his head firmly. You were supposed to be a reason to stop, a reason to try being human again. He paused. I didn't expect you to love me. I don't expect that now. But I hoped maybe we could be friends. Maybe over time, we could build something real. Vela stood there in the quiet room, looking at this man she had married. She had thought he was ordinary. She had pitied herself for being traded to someone so unremarkable. But he was the furthest thing from ordinary. He was a monster by his own admission. A killer who had ended thousands of lives. And yet he had volunteered for this mission because he read her poetry. Because he thought she deserved kindness. She crossed the room slowly. Caleb watched her approach with uncertain eyes. She stopped in front of him and looked up at his face. You could have told me sooner, she said. I didn't know how. I didn't know if you would be afraid of me. Are you going to hurt me? Never. The word came out immediately, without hesitation. I would die before I let anyone hurt you, including myself. Vela believed him. She did not know why, but she believed him completely. I don't know what we are, she said. I don't know if I can love someone who has done the things you've done, but I know you saved my life today. And I know you've been kind to me every single day since we met. She reached out and took his hand, the same hand that had killed 14 Korthax warriors without effort. It was warm and calloused and trembled slightly under her touch. So, let's find out together. Let's see what we can build. Caleb's eyes grew wet. He blinked rapidly and looked away. Thank you, he whispered. Don't thank me yet, Vela said. You still have to explain why you never told me about those medals. Despite everything, Caleb laughed. It was a small surprise sound, like he had forgotten how to make it. One secret at a time, he said. Fair enough. Vela squeezed his hand. Now get some sleep, you look terrible. Yes, ma'am, Caleb said, and for the first time since she had known him, he actually smiled. 3 months after the attack on the convoy, Vela received word that her homeworld was burning. The message came in the middle of the night, a priority transmission from the Aetherian High Council. She watched the recording with Caleb beside her, and she felt her heart break into 1,000 pieces. The Korthax Dominion had launched a full invasion of Aethera Prime. 40 warships had appeared from hyperspace without warning. The planetary defense fleet, already weakened from decades of war, had been destroyed in hours. Ground forces were now pouring through the atmosphere, landing in massive dropships that blocked out the sun. Her father's face appeared on the screen. He looked old. He looked defeated. The shields around Soleth Kai have fallen, he said. The capital will be overrun by morning. We are preparing to negotiate surrender terms. His voice cracked. I am sorry, my daughter. I have failed our people. The transmission ended. Vela sat in silence. Her home, her family, her entire civilization. All of it was about to be swallowed by the Korthax. "How long until we can get there?" she asked. Caleb had already pulled up navigation charts. 6 hours at maximum speed. But by then it will be over. She closed her eyes and tried not to cry. She had always known this day might come. The Aetherians had been losing the war for years, but knowing something and experiencing it were very different things. "There might be a way," Caleb said quietly. She opened her eyes. "What?" He was studying the tactical reports that had come with the transmission. His face was calm, focused, calculating. It was the same expression she had seen on the convoy, right before he killed those Korthax warriors. "The Korthax are confident," he said. "They think they've already won. They're not expecting resistance. If someone could get behind their lines, disrupt their command structure, create enough chaos." "One person against 40,000 warriors?" Vela shook her head. "That's impossible. Even for you." "Maybe." Caleb looked at her. "Maybe not." She stared at him. "You can't be serious." "I've done similar things before. Smaller scale, but the principle is the same. Cut the head off the snake, and the body dies. Kill enough commanders, destroy enough supply lines, and even the biggest army falls apart. You'll die. Possibly," he nodded. "Probably. But if I can buy enough time for reinforcements to arrive, your people might survive. The Terran fleet is 3 days away. If the Korthax retreat before then, Iphyra can be saved." Vela grabbed his arm. "I won't let you do this. I won't let you throw your life away." "It's not throwing it away." Caleb covered her hand with his own. "It's spending it. There's a difference." "What difference? Dead is dead." He was quiet for a moment. Then he spoke softly. "All my life I've killed because someone told me to. I've followed orders and completed missions and never asked why. I was a weapon. Tools don't need reasons." He paused. "But this would be different. This would be my choice, my reason. I would be fighting for something that matters to me." "And what matters to you?" "You." He said it simply, without hesitation. "Your family, your people, the world where you grew up, and the sisters you love, and the poems you write by moonlight. All of it matters, because it's part of you." Vela felt tears running down her face. She did not try to stop them. "I never asked you to save my world," she whispered. "You never had to." Caleb smiled gently. "That's what husbands are supposed to do." They argued for another hour. Vela threw every objection she could think of. Caleb answered each one with quiet patience. In the end, she ran out of arguments. Not because he had defeated her logic, but because she saw the truth in his eyes. He was going to do this whether she agreed or not. The only choice she had was whether to fight him or support him. She chose to support him. The ship carrying them reached Aethera Prime, just as dawn was breaking over the capital. From orbit, they could see the fires burning across the continent. The beautiful silver towers of Soleth Kai were covered in smoke. Korthax landing craft dotted the landscape like metal insects. Caleb prepared himself in silence. He put on a suit of black armor that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. He strapped weapons to his body until he bristled with sharp edges and dark metal. But he carried no gun, just knives. Many, many knives. "I need 12 hours, he told the Aetherian Council through the ship's communication system. "Delay the surrender. Keep them talking. Give me 12 hours, and there won't be an army left to surrender to." The generals laughed at him. One human against 40,000 Korthax? Impossible. Insane. But Vela's father silenced them with a raised hand. He looked at Caleb through the screen, studying him carefully. "My daughter believes in you," he said slowly. "She has never been a fool. Very well, you will have your 12 hours. Caleb nodded once. Then he turned to Vela. She threw her arms around him and held on tight. He was warm and solid and real, and in a few moments he would be gone, walking into a battle he could not possibly survive. "Come back to me," she said into his chest. He kissed the top of her head. "I'll try." "Don't try. Promise." He pulled back and looked into her eyes. His face was calm, but she could see something burning beneath the surface. Something fierce and bright. "I promise," he said. Then he stepped into the drop pod, and the door closed, and he fell toward the burning world below. The next 12 hours were the longest of Vela's life. She stayed on the ship, monitoring communication channels, watching reports come in from the surface. At first, there was nothing unusual. The Korthax continued their advance toward the palace. The Aetheran defenders fought bravely, but hopelessly. Then the reports started to change. A Korthax commander went silent, then another, then 5 more. Patrols began disappearing without sending distress signals. Ammunition depots exploded in the middle of the night. Officers were found dead in their tents with no sign of forced entry. The Korthax army started to panic. By midnight, the invasion had stopped completely. The warriors refused to leave their camps. They huddled together in groups, weapons drawn, shooting at shadows. Rumors spread through their ranks like wildfire. Demons, ghosts, an entire army destroyed by something they could not see or fight. By dawn, they were running. Dropships launched in chaotic waves, carrying terrified soldiers back to their warships. The warships themselves began retreating, breaking formation, fleeing toward hyperspace. One man had done this. One human had broken an army of 40,000 warriors. Vela watched the last Korthax ship disappear from sensors. Then she ordered the shuttle to take her to the surface. She found Caleb walking through the palace gates as the sun rose. He was covered in ash and blood and dirt. His armor was torn in a dozen places. He limped on his left leg, but he was alive. He saw her and stopped. For a moment, he just stood there, swaying slightly, like a man at the end of his strength. 12 hours, he said, his voice rough and exhausted. Told you. Then his legs gave out, and Vela ran to catch him before he hit the ground. The doctors said Caleb should have died 100 times that night. He had 17 broken bones. He had lost enough blood to kill 3 normal humans. He had wounds from Korthax blades, plasma burns, shrapnel, and things the doctors could not identify. His body was a map of damage, each injury telling a story of violence that seemed impossible to survive. But he was not a normal human. He was a Reaper. And Reapers, it seemed, were very hard to kill. Vela sat beside his medical pod for 3 weeks. She left only when the doctors forced her to eat and sleep. The rest of the time, she stayed in that small room, watching machines pump healing fluids into her husband's broken body. She read to him, poetry mostly, her own poems, the ones she had written in secret over the years. She had never shared them with anyone before, but somehow, reading them to Caleb felt right. Even if he could not hear her. She told him about the reconstruction efforts happening outside. The Aetheran people were rebuilding. The fires were out. The dead were being buried with honor. And everyone talked about the human who had saved them. They called him the Shadow that Walks. They said he was a spirit sent by the gods. They did not know his name, only his deeds. Hundreds of Korthax commanders killed in a single night. Thousands of warriors scattered by fear alone. An entire invasion broken by one man. Vela's father came to visit once. He stood at the foot of Caleb's pod and stared at the broken human floating in healing fluid. I misjudged him, he said quietly. I thought he was nothing, a token gesture from the humans. I was wrong. Yes, Vela agreed. You were. Her father looked at her. You love him. It was not a question. Vela answered anyway. I don't know what I feel. I know he saved our people. I know he almost died for us. I know that when I'm with him, I feel safe and warm and valued in ways I never felt before. She paused. Is that love? I don't know, but it's something. Her father nodded slowly. That sounds like a good start. Caleb woke on the 22nd day. Vela was reading a poem about starlight when she heard the machines change their rhythm. She looked up and saw his eyes open. Those quiet, brown eyes, the ones that had seen so much death, looked around the room in confusion. Where? His voice cracked. He swallowed and tried again. Where am I? Home, Vela said. She reached into the pod and took his hand. You're home. He stared at her for a long moment. Then his face crumpled, and tears began streaming down his cheeks. I kept my promise, he whispered. Yes. Vela leaned forward and pressed her forehead against his. You did. The recovery took 2 more months. Caleb had to learn to walk again. His enhanced body healed faster than any normal human, but even Reapers had limits. He spent hours each day in rehabilitation, pushing himself harder than the doctors wanted, refusing to rest. Vela pushed back. She forced him to sleep. She made him eat. She sat with him when the nightmares came, holding his hand through the darkness, reminding him that he was not alone anymore. Somewhere in those quiet moments, something changed between them. It was not a dramatic shift. There was no single moment when everything clicked into place. It was more like water wearing away stone, slow and gentle and unstoppable. They learned each other's rhythms. They developed private jokes and secret smiles. They started finishing each other's sentences without realizing it. One night, Vela climbed into bed beside him instead of leaving for her own room. Caleb looked at her with surprise, then something softer. She curled against his side and listened to his heartbeat, steady and strong. I think I'm falling in love with you, she said. I've been in love with you since I read your poems, he replied. That's not fair. You had a head start. I'll try to make it up to you. She laughed and kissed him, and for the first time, it felt like coming home. The Korthax Dominion sued for peace 1 month later. The terms of the treaty were dictated entirely by the Aetherin-Terran alliance. The Dominion would withdraw from all occupied territories. They would pay reparations. They would never threaten Aetherin space again. The war that had lasted 30 years ended with a single signature. At the signing ceremony, the Korthax ambassadors stared at Caleb with undisguised fear. Everyone knew now what he had done. The Korthax warriors still had nightmares about the night one human had hunted them through their own camps. You are the shadow, the ambassador said. I'm just a husband, Caleb replied. Years passed. The galaxy settled into an uneasy peace. The alliance between humans and Aetherins grew stronger. Trade flourished. Cultures mixed. A new era began. Vela and Caleb built a life together. They moved to a small house near the crystal streams of Aethera Prime, far from the noise of politics. Caleb learned to fish. Vela learned to cook human food. They argued about small things and laughed about big things, and loved each other through all of it. They had 2 children, a daughter first, with her father's brown eyes and her mother's silver skin. Then a son, loud and energetic and always getting into trouble. One day, when their daughter was old enough to understand, she asked how they met. Vela smiled and said it was an arranged marriage. Did you love him right away? The girl asked. Vela looked at Caleb. He was by the stream, teaching their son how to cast a fishing line. The sunlight made his gray hair shine like silver. He was older now, softer. The weapon had become a gardener, a father, a man who made terrible jokes and burned dinner at least twice a week. But sometimes, when he looked at her, she still saw the fire that had driven him to walk alone into an army. No, she admitted. I didn't love him right away, but I learned to, and that made it even better. Why? Her daughter asked. Vela thought about it. She thought about all the paths her life could have taken, all the people she might have married, all the futures that never happened. Because love that grows is stronger than love that falls, she said. It has roots. It can survive storms. When you choose to love someone, day after day, year after year, it becomes part of who you are. It becomes unbreakable. Her daughter thought about this for a moment. Then she nodded seriously, as if she understood. Maybe she did, maybe she did not. But someday she would. Someday she would find her own person to choose, day after day, year after year. And she would know that her parents had shown her how. Caleb walked up from the stream, their son chattering excitedly beside him. He was holding a small fish and smiling the proud smile of a boy who had accomplished something important. "Look what I caught," the boy shouted. "Can we cook it for dinner?" "Of course," Vela said. Caleb met her eyes and smiled. It was the same smile he had given her on their wedding day, all those years ago. Quiet, warm, full of promises he intended to keep. She smiled back. This was the life they had built. Not perfect, not always easy, but real and strong and full of love. It had started with an arrangement. It had become something far more. And that, Vela thought, was the most human thing of all.